Welcome to this presentation on how to apply for jobs with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. This video is divided into sections, so if you only want information on a specific step in the application process, you can skip to it using the timestamps in the video's description. Let's get started. It's important to read the entire job posting before applying for a job. Let's look at some of the key information stated here. The first section of information tells you the pay rate, whether it is a full-time or part-time position, the number of vacancies being filled by this posting, and the closing date. The general description tells you what the main job duties will be. The minimum and preferred qualifications tell you what type of experience or training is required. You must meet all of the minimum qualifications for your application to be considered. The licensure statement lists any licenses the employee is required to have or will be required to obtain within 30 days of employment. Most jobs will require you to possess a state-issued driver's license at the time of applying. Not being able to meet these requirements can result in your application being rejected or termination of employment. You are not required to meet the preferred qualifications. However, they represent the main areas of experience we are looking for in a candidate, so you should still take them into consideration. For clarity, the minimum qualifications must be met in order for your application to be considered, but you are not required to meet the preferred qualifications. The Knowledge, Skills, and Abilities, or KSAs for short, list in detail the criteria the hiring manager will be using to review applications. You must demonstrate through your work experience how you meet these criteria. As an example, let's look at the skill use of Microsoft Word, Excel, and Outlook. You can show that you have experience in this area with a statement similar to the following. I use Microsoft Excel to track the company's budget. Do not copy and paste the KSAs into your application, as listing the KSAs themselves does not demonstrate how you have experience in an area. Pay close attention to the working conditions section as it lists the type of work schedule and travel requirements for the position. If you have any questions about a specific job, you can contact the hiring manager listed on the job posting. Now that you've thoroughly read the job posting, you're ready to start your application. The first section you'll get to is the resume upload. You can upload your resume and the system will automatically pull the relevant information from it and fill in part of your application. If you choose to do this, it is advised that you look over your application to ensure that all required fields have been completed properly, especially the start and end dates for your prior work experience. Without dates, we can't determine how many years of experience you've had, which will get your application disqualified. The second section is where you'll enter your personal information. Any field with a red asterisk next to it must be completed. The bottom half of this section is where you declare veteran or foster status. If you wish to have your veteran status considered in the selection process, you must attach your DD-214. If your DD-214 is not attached, we are not required to grant you veteran status when vetting applications. We'll discuss application attachments in Section 6. Veterans can send any questions they may have to vetcontact@tpwd.texas.gov. It's also shown here on the screen. The last thing in this section are your preferences for work schedules, amount of on-the-job travel time, and minimum salary. These are optional and not considered when selecting applicants for interviews. Although you may want to double-check the work schedule and travel time requirements on the job description to make sure they fit your preferences. For example, a park operations trainee position requires the employee to move after a 3-year time period. Being unable or unwilling to move could result in being terminated from the agency. Remote work opportunities will be stated in the job posting under the working conditions section. The next two sections will ask you a series of questions. The questions and additional information. Some job postings may require you to answer questions related to the job you're applying for. For example, on the job posting for an interpreter at Sauer Beckman Farm, there are questions pertaining to the minimum and preferred qualifications. Some questions may ask about more specific subjects that are needed to be successful on the job. Here you can see a question about 20th century domestic skills. These questions are meant to be a self-screening to see how well you qualify for the position. You still have to demonstrate how you meet the job qualifications under the Education and Work Experience section, which we'll talk about next. Section 4 is one of the most important, and one that usually causes most people to be excluded from consideration for interviews. We vet all applicants based on their education and experience. Again, when reading a job posting, pay close attention to the minimum and preferred qualifications, the education requirements, and the knowledge, skills, and abilities, or KSAs for short. These are the criteria that we'll use to assess your application. They need to be demonstrated in your education and work experience. It is important that you include any and all levels of education you've had, starting with your high school diploma or GED. Please include all start and end dates. If your anticipated graduation date is after the job posting has closed, your degree will not count towards the education requirement. If education is used as a substitute to meet any of the requirements of the job posting, a copy of a college transcript issued from the registrar must be provided if you are selected for an interview. When listing work experience, start with your most recent job. It is important to add the start and end dates, as some jobs have time requirements as a part of the minimum or preferred qualifications. For example, assistant office manager positions require a minimum of 2 years experience performing administrative support duties. If you do not enter the start and end dates of employment, we can't determine the amount of time you spent performing these duties. This time does not have to be from a single job, but can be the sum total of time from multiple jobs held at different times. Experience from multiple jobs held concurrently will not count as double though. For example, if you worked as a cashier at Lowe's and a cashier at a local bookstore at the same time for 6 months, that will only count as 6 months of experience handling cash, not 1 year. There will be more information in the video's description on how we calculate time. If previous supervisory experience is a requirement, you will need to check the box next to supervisory/managerial under job type and show proof in your job's duties. The other important piece of information we use when vetting applications are the duties you performed at your previous jobs. We do not review resumes in lieu of completed applications. If you put "See resume" or "See attached" instead of listing your work experience, your application will not be considered. You must show through your work experience that you meet the qualifications listed in the minimum requirements and the KSAs. We want to know what your day-to-day job duties were. Do not copy and paste the KSAs into your application, and avoid the use of jargon or acronyms. If the use of acronyms is unavoidable, like when stating military experience, define the term first before using its acronym. You may use either paragraphs or bullets to present this information. Volunteer and internship work counts as work experience, so please be sure to include them. The certification section is where you upload certificates for any relevant trainings or skills. For example, if you're applying for a seasonal lifeguard position, which requires you to obtain a Red Cross approved lifeguard certification, you can specify that you have obtained it here. Location is not important, but if your certification has an expiration date, you will need to complete the issue and expiration date fields. Section 5 asks you to specify preferred job field, location, and organization. Select the options that best correspond to your professional interests. For state parks or TPWD in general, it is suggested that you select life, physical, and social science as your preferred job field. You must add at least one work location to your application, preferably the work location of the job you are currently applying for. Section 6 is where you add attachments to your application. Examples of relevant attachments include official college transcripts and certificates showing completion of training. Before uploading a file, please make sure the name clearly identifies the file's content. To upload a file, you will need to click Choose File and locate it on your computer. You can also add a comment about the file if you wish. After selecting the file, you will then click Attach. It will now appear in the bottom section. Remember, we do not review resumes in lieu of completed applications. Attaching a cover letter to your application is highly suggested. Section 7 asks you to list job references. Please include as many professional references as possible and avoid listing only personal references. It is suggested that you have a minimum of 3 and to include at least 2 backups in case we have trouble getting in touch with one of them. Inform your references that you've listed them on your application. so they can anticipate being contacted by the hiring manager. One of the biggest holdups in the hiring process is references not responding to the hiring manager's attempts to get in touch with them. The final section is where you review and submit your application. Ensure that all information is correct and any files you wish to attach to your application have the box next to them checked. You will need to check the boxes next to your attachments each time you submit an application. However, you do not need to re-upload them each time. You can save your application as a draft if you need to stop and come back to it later. You cannot make edits to your application after submitting it. Once you are certain the information in your application is complete and correct, you can hit submit. Congratulations, you've just submitted your application. After you submit your application, you will be asked to complete the diversity survey. This survey is required for federal reporting purposes and not used in vetting applications. If you have general questions about the hiring process, please contact our Human Resources Department at the email address shown here. If you have questions about a specific position, it is recommended that you contact the hiring manager listed on the job posting. There will be a link in the video's description to information about benefits and other useful information. Thank you for watching.